What happens when a promise made under oath collides with the truth exposed in public? When the nation's top law enforcement agency is accused of serving power instead of the people it swore to protect. That's exactly what played out when Representative Deborah Ross looked straight at FBI Director Kash Patel and said, in front of millions, "You've flunked your own test." The room fell silent. For a moment, no one moved. It wasn't just a question of leadership, it was a question of integrity. Because if the FBI bends to politics, who's left to uphold the law? Ross began calmly, but the tone in her voice carried the weight of years of broken promises.
Decisions shall be based on performance and adherence to the law, and every FBI employee will be held to the absolute same standard, and no one will be terminated for case assignments. So I want to just go through a couple scenarios with you to get a sense of whether you think these are examples of politicization of the FBI or making decisions based on the performance and adherence to the law. So, first question. Would hiring FBI agents, analysts, and supervisors from only one political party being politicization of the FBI or making personnel decisions based on performance and adherence to the law?
We don't ask FBI people, applicants, where their political parties are.
Mr. Patel, do you ask FBI applicants who they voted for?
The FBI does not.
Are you aware that in the lawsuit that Mr. Driscoll filed against you and the FBI, he was asked who he voted for?
Since that lawsuit has been filed, that's ongoing litigation, I'm not able to comment.
Well, but it also means that you just said that what happened in his situation didn't happen. So we will go on to the next question. Let me ask you an even easier one. Does firing agents for working on the cases that they were assigned to and that the president didn't like, is that politicization of the FBI or making personnel decisions based on performance and adherence to the law?
The FBI doesn't terminate anyone based on case assignments alone.
Has the FBI ever been sued by somebody who felt that they were terminated based on case assignments?
In the entire history of the FBI, I'm sure they have.
No, since your tenure.
I'm sure there's ongoing litigation.
Yes. In fact, there is ongoing litigation. And in fact, people have been asked who they voted for. And in fact, you are running an FBI for the President of the United States rather than the people of the United States, because my questions were not hypotheticals. They are the things you have done during your tenure. And according to a lawsuit filed last week by long-term FBI agents, you fired former acting director Brian Driscoll. He had served with the Bureau for nearly 20 years, earned a Medal of Honor, Medal of Valor for bravery during the dangerous ISIS raid, and had a wealth of crisis response experience and led the FBI's critical incident response group. When the Trump administrations interviewed Mr. Driscoll for that role, they interrogated him about his political leanings and who he voted for in the last 5 elections. Questions Mr. Driscoll refused to answer because those types of questions impermissibly politicized the FBI. You also fired Steve Jensen, who served the FBI for nearly 2 decades and ran critical terrorism, counterintelligence, and organized crime operations, whom you once described as embodying what the American public demands of the FBI. But he was fired because he took part in investigating crimes committed on January 6th. And Trump's MAGA base lambasted you online for keeping him at the FBI. So he's no longer at the FBI. You also fired a decorated combat veteran with decades of experience in the Bureau, Special Agent Walter Jardia, because he worked on the investigation into the Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election and helped investigate Trump's ally, Peter Navarro. Director Patel, it is very clear that you have flunked your own test. You've put saving your job, which I actually believe you were being honest about during your confirmation hearings, over doing what's right for the FBI and the American people. That is not adherence to the law. Thank you, and I yield back.
Time of the gentleladies.
She reminded Patel of his own words from his confirmation hearing, his oath to keep the Bureau free from political interference. He had vowed that no agent would ever be hired or fired because of their political views, that performance and adherence to the law would be the only standards that mattered. But that assurance, Ross warned, was unraveling right before everyone's eyes. Because while Patel claimed to protect impartiality, lawsuits, leaks, and testimonies were beginning to tell a much darker story. And what Ross revealed next made that promise look like nothing more than a performance for the cameras. She started simple. Would hiring FBI agents from only one political party be politicization of the FBI? It was a straightforward question. Patel tried to dodge it, insisting the Bureau never asks about party affiliation. But Ross didn't blink. Are you aware, she pressed, that in a lawsuit filed against you, one agent was asked who he voted for? Patel froze. He fell back on the same line. Ongoing litigation. Can't comment, can't confirm. But every word he avoided became its own answer. Because Ross wasn't dealing in hypotheticals. She was laying out what she called a pattern of loyalty tests, retaliatory firings, and a culture of fear inside the agency, once known for neutrality. The first name she mentioned was Brian Driscoll. Nearly 20 years of service. A Medal of Valor. A man who had led crisis response teams through some of the most dangerous operations in the Bureau's history. He'd built a career on courage and competence. But when leadership interviews turned political, the questions weren't about tactics or intelligence. They were about ideology. According to legal filings, Driscoll was interrogated about who he voted for in multiple elections. He refused to answer, calling it inappropriate. And soon after, his career ended abruptly. No scandal, no misconduct, just gone. Ross called it what it was, a loyalty test disguised as procedure. The kind of question that never belonged inside an institution built on trust. And the silence in the hearing room said it all. Every face watching knew what that meant. If questioning a veteran agent's politics can cost him his career, no one in that building could feel truly safe from pressure. But Ross wasn't done. She shifted to another name, another career erased by quiet politics, Steve Jensen. 2 decades with the Bureau. He had led major counterterrorism operations, built organized crime cases, and even earned praise from Patel himself for representing what Americans expect from the FBI. But the trouble came when Jensen worked on investigations tied to the January 6th attack. Online extremists began targeting him, accusing him of bias, and soon the internal pressure followed. Without a formal explanation, he was out. Ross didn't mince words. You fired him because he did his job. The accusation hung in the air. Patel's lips moved, but the microphone picked up only the faint sound of deflection. Each example Ross cited painted the same chilling picture. Agents punished not for breaking the law, but for enforcing it. She wasn't just describing isolated incidents. She was sketching a pattern of control that had seeped into the FBI's bloodstream. And as the room leaned forward, she dropped the third name that brought everything together. Walter Jardia, a decorated combat veteran, an investigator who dedicated his career to tracking foreign interference and exposing corruption. He had helped lead a probe into Russian meddling during the 2016 election, an assignment that should have been above politics. But soon, he too was gone. No misconduct, no disciplinary note, just the quiet purge of another name on the wrong side of power. Ross leaned into the microphone, her voice steady. Director Patel, you said personnel decisions would be based on performance and adherence to the law. But these men performed. They served. They upheld the law. So what exactly are they being punished for? No answer came. Patel's face remained expressionless, but everyone watching knew the answer wasn't silence. It was proof. Proof that the Bureau, under his leadership, had crossed a line from impartiality into influence. The tension in the room wasn't just about these firings. It was about something bigger, whether the FBI could still claim to be independent at all. Because when law enforcement starts to serve political interests, it doesn't just lose credibility, it loses the trust of the nation. Ross knew that, and she framed it for every viewer watching at home. This wasn't about party lines or ideology. It was about whether justice itself had become negotiable. She turned the conversation from names to principles. When agents are afraid that the next case they take could cost them their career, that's not discipline. It's intimidation. Her words hit hard because everyone knew how right she was. The idea that investigators could be punished for touching politically sensitive cases meant that truth itself was now a liability. How can any citizen believe in justice if even the enforcers are afraid to tell it? Ross laid out the cost in simple terms. The firings didn't just hurt individuals. They sent a message to every agent still serving. Follow the rules and you're expendable. Cross the wrong political line and you're done. In that kind of environment, the most dangerous thing an FBI agent could do was their actual job. And as the hearing continued, you could almost feel the oxygen leave the room. What made this confrontation different wasn't the anger or the theatrics. It was the documentation. Ross had come prepared with official records, lawsuit filings, and statements that couldn't be brushed away. Every time Patel tried to hide behind ongoing litigation, she countered with a name, a date, a sworn statement. It was surgical, precise, each point tightening the circle around him until there was nowhere left to hide. But beneath the tension, there was something even deeper, a sense of betrayal. Because Patel's confirmation promise wasn't just a line in a transcript, it was a reassurance to every American that the Bureau was bigger than politics. Yet here was the evidence suggesting otherwise. And that realization hit harder than any accusation could. Viewers who tuned in expecting another routine oversight hearing were witnessing something rare, a real moment of accountability. Ross wasn't trying to score political points. She was exposing the fragility of a system built on trust. Every fired agent, every silenced voice represented a crack in the foundation of impartial justice. Then came the line that would echo across social media. You are running an FBI for the President of the United States, rather than the people of the United States. No names, no partisan framing, just the blunt accusation that power had replaced principle. And whether or not Patel believed it, the weight of that sentence lingered in the air long after she yielded her time. The cameras caught Patel's face, stone still, eyes fixed ahead. It was the look of a man who knew the questions weren't going away. Because once the public starts to wonder who the FBI truly serves, every investigation, every verdict, every press conference becomes a test of faith. And faith, once shaken, is hard to rebuild. Behind Ross's calm tone was something more strategic, a warning shot for the future. Oversight hearings like this aren't just about one director or one administration. They're about drawing the line between power and accountability before that line disappears entirely. When law enforcement bends to politics, it doesn't just punish insiders. It endangers everyone outside the walls who depends on truth to mean something. That's why this confrontation resonated far beyond the committee room. It wasn't just about the names Ross listed. It was about every agent who stayed quiet, every investigator who chose not to pursue a lead because they feared the consequences. It was about the silent erosion of trust that happens long before the headlines appear. Ross ended her questioning not with rage, but with clarity. You put saving your job above doing what's right for the FBI and the American people. It was the kind of statement that leaves no room for interpretation. And in that moment, she wasn't just speaking to Patel. She was speaking to the public watching from home, reminding them that democracy doesn't collapse overnight. It decays quietly, one unchallenged decision at a time. The power of her words wasn't in the accusation, but in the evidence. Because she had shown, step by step, how good agents doing honest work became casualties of a political climate that rewarded loyalty over law. Each story added to the bigger truth. Impartiality isn't something you can fake. It's proven through choices. And when those choices consistently favor one side of power, the myth of neutrality falls apart. By the time the hearing ended, the question wasn't whether the Bureau had been politicized. It was whether it could ever be depoliticized again. And that's what makes this hearing more than a headline. It's a mirror held up to every institution that claims to serve the public. When people in power forget who they work for, the system stops working for everyone else. What viewers witnessed wasn't just another Washington showdown. It was a reminder of what accountability is supposed to look like: direct, evidence-based, and unapologetically uncomfortable. Ross didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The facts did the shouting for her. And as the camera pulled back and the session adjourned, one truth lingered. The fight for institutional integrity doesn't end with one hearing. It continues in every decision, every promotion, every quiet act of courage by those who refuse to let justice be rewritten. That's the story hidden beneath the headlines. Not about politics, but about principle. About whether truth can survive pressure, and whether power can ever be truly held accountable when the watchers become the watched if moments like this matter to you. If you believe the public deserves transparency and truth no matter who it exposes, then make sure you don't miss what comes next. Because this hearing may have ended, but the investigation into justice itself is still unfolding. So stay curious. Keep questioning. And if you want to follow every twist in stories like this, subscribe, hit the bell, and drop a like. Because the more people stay informed, the harder it becomes for power to hide in plain sight.